Hi everyone, how's it going? My name is Dan Finley, and this is The Story Grind, a show where we take a look at storytelling so we can become better storytellers. Today we are studying issue number 1 of Little Bird. Story Grind is brought to you by the stories that I make. If you want to follow along on my story writing journey, subscribe to the monthly newsletter where I give monthly updates. Links to both are in the description below. If you really like the show, please like, follow, and subscribe and share with your friends. Your support means a lot. So Little Bird is one of those comics that I heard about when it first came out, but for some reason I never got around to reading it. And I just kind of forgot about it after that, but I kept hearing so many good things about it that it's been on my list to pick up for a while now. And then all of a sudden, a prequel to the comic has come out called Precious Metal, and I did get my hands on that, and I started reading it, and I thought, you know what, before I actually finish reading this prequel, maybe I should read Little Bird. I can tell you that I can see why there was so much buzz around this book. It is really a masterclass in world building with the least amount of information possible. I mean, it's done so incredibly well, and I can't wait to go through this book with you. So let's check out Little Bird. So let me give you a little bit of the details on Little Bird. It came out in 2019. It is 5 issues long. The first issue is 36 pages. And here are the credits of the people who helped make it. Okay, scene 1 is only 3 pages. Let's start with the very first panel, which is a close-up of a woman with a corpse paint type makeup on. There's a title on here that says The Rocky Mountains, Canada. Her dialogue is, "This doesn't end here, not like this." Now, let's just stop there for a moment. How great is that as a first panel? Because when you hear that, you already understand that a battle is about to happen, and within the first dialogue balloon, that she set up the stakes for us. When you say something like, "This doesn't end here, not like this," I feel like you're already losing the battle, and you're just kind of reassuring yourself that it's going to go well. So I gotta give kudos to the creative team here for making this first panel just such a great way to just draw the reader in. I'm already on board. This looks and sounds great. I also want to mention that this is a great point of empathy. The very first panel, very first page, we're about to watch a battle happen, and it's the underdog. We're watching the underdogs, and if they're the underdogs, I'm already kind of rooting for them. So, big point of empathy right there for them, right at the bat, right at the beginning. Really nice. So in panel 2, we see this woman. Her name is Tantu. She gives a speech to a crowd, hyping them up for this battle that's about to happen. It's a very nice sort of wide shot showing us sort of a ragtag team of fighters. And immediately, as soon as I saw it, I thought, okay, this has got to be some type of colonial era battle, because I see people with robes and bows and arrows, and it looks like maybe muskets, and they're wearing like cloaks, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a story that takes place in the past. Maybe like she looks almost like maybe Native American. Maybe this is like a few tribes banding together to fight off colonialism. So at the end of page 1, we see Tantu jump down from the pedestal, and I think this is a great opportunity to point out the way the artist draws motion. Now, you could have seen like the classical like swoop lines coming through the frame, kind of showing the motion of her jumping down from the pedestal, but instead you'll frequently see the artist draw almost like reactions in the environment to the motion that has just happened. So in this case, we see water splashing up as she lands on the ground, which is really nice. So let's move into page 2. And on page 2, we see more of that motion, where we see a lot of figures kind of static, standing straight, and Tantu and Little Bird are leaning so far forward, they have to be moving, right? So let me get into a little bit about panel 2 here, which really surprised me. Is I'm still thinking, is the story takes place in the past. You see this guy in the foreground, or I should say in the midground, and he's holding this, what has to be a musket, right? He's wearing sort of this maybe like old trapper's type outfit, weird feathered hat and trench coat. But then I see this metal box on a tree with an antenna on it, and I'm thinking, whoa, this is not in the past at all. This is in the future. This is like some kind of tribal futuristic mashup, which is really, really cool. It's a lot of fun. So Tantu escorts Little Bird into a hiding spot, and Tantu says, "Do you understand everything we've discussed?" Now, notice how we haven't really been told what they've discussed. There was a plan that was hatched before we even entered the story, and they don't have time to catch us up, right? The time is of the essence. A battle is about to happen. They're getting ready, and there is no time to tell us what the plan was, which is nice. It's really well done. We do get some context clues, though. Little Bird is lowered into the hiding space, and we see that this is definitely not a story that takes place in the past. We have like a dresser with some cans of food, we have some electronics on the wall, and a poster. So, this is a really great way of just kind of reaffirming that we are in sort of this weird sci-fi tribalistic mashup. So we get into page 3, and Tantu is holding a watch, and she says that it's been a long time, but he will remember. The fate of the resistance depends on it. So this again reaffirms that we are watching the side of the resistance. We are watching the underdogs. She gets a map that leads to where the axe is being held, and then she tells her Little Bird to say that hope exists and that Tantu will come back for Little Bird. And then Little Bird is handed the map, and as they close the trap door, Little Bird says, "Mother, don't go." So there is a familial connection between these two, mother and daughter. So in these 3 pages, what do we know? We know we're in sort of a primitive sci-fi mashup. That's part tribal, part futuristic. We know that there's a battle about to happen. We have the stakes, which is really important. We know that the side we're following right now is the side of the resistance, and most likely the underdog. And we know that Little Bird is a key part of this plan to find a person named the Axe. That's a lot of information to be told in just 3 pages. How much of that world building was told through narration? Absolutely zero, which is incredible. The world building is all done through the visuals. The dialogue delivers only the most essential information, which is really nice. We don't have any large conversations explaining what's happening and what the world is and what kind of technology they have. None of that. It just gives you the bare essentials, which is really well done. All right, here we go. Scene 2, 5 pages. This is page number 4. We get a title that says 3 days later. Pretty long battle, right? And now we actually do start to get a narration from Little Bird. But before I start talking about that, I really want to point out how this landscape, the coloring in this landscape compares to the exact same landscape in the previous page. Notice how the previous page was like this lush blue-green tone, and now we're in sort of this almost pastel orange tone. Again, storytelling through visuals, not through words. This battle was 3 days long. It was brutal. And you see that the trees and all the landscape has been destroyed. Everything is smoldering. A really great way of conveying a very long and powerful battle without actually having to show it. So now let's start with the narration. Little Bird says, "My name is Little Bird, and this is the story of my life and my death. A story about my mother, my father, and everyone else that tried to kill me." Pretty dramatic, right? Especially coming from a child. About waking up to realize that sometimes it becomes more about fighting than what you're fighting for. It's about the people I met along the way and the ones I never really knew at all, but more than anything. Then we go into page 5. We get a really nice tight close-up of Little Bird's eyes as she sees the destruction firsthand for the very first time, and her narration continues. It's about the all-consuming nature of fire and the dreams we make of ash. So now we have like about a 3/4 page splash dedicated to the aftermath of this battle, and everything is smoldering. The entire city or the entire village has been destroyed. So right here, this is our inciting incident for the story. We had Little Bird's life was in balance, and now that everything's been destroyed, and we can presume that her mother is dead. It's upset the balance of her world, and now she's on a mission to restore that balance. I think there's also, it's really well done here because there's also a point of empathy here. We've seen her life be completely destroyed, right? I can get on board with that, and I can completely empathize with that. So now we're at page 5, and we have not just one, but 2 points of empathy and an inciting incident, all within 5 pages, which is incredibly fast. And it's incredibly well done and incredibly effective. So how is Little Bird going to get her life back into balance? What does she need to get it back into balance? Provided this is like a traditional story arc, she'll need a community, she'll need her mother, most likely, and the people who did this to her friends and family will have to be prevented from ever doing that again, whatever that means. So we know at the end of the story, if it follows a traditional story arc, that's what's going to happen in order for this story to end for us. Notice how we didn't spend too much time in the ordinary world before the inciting incident. We didn't see Little Bird as a child playing with her pets, playing with her friends, enjoying her mother's cooking, right? We just went right into the story. Now, this can be a little tricky at times. It's sort of a trade-off. One, you get people into the story right away, but at the same time, you're kind of getting rid of the internal character arc for that character, or at least you're pushing it off a little bit. And it can be done poorly. Luckily, this is done really well. I mean, I'm already on board. I'm interested. I want to read more. I've seen some stories where they try to do this, and I wish they had spent more time with the character, or we understood what that character arc is. And I think there's something going on here, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it in the analysis. But for now, let's just keep going over the scenes so we're all on the same page. All right. Speaking of pages, we're on page 6. Little Bird is searching for her mother in the wreckage and discovers a helmet with a message playing inside it. We get our first view of the antagonist in this future world. He is a religious zealot who is committing genocide in the name of God and the Holy Empire. In an earlier scene, we saw the village is a part of Canada. Well, these visually show the new American flag. So we know that we are essentially in a battle of Canada versus America in some way. The antagonistic force is also very technologically advanced compared to the ragtag tribal group we saw earlier. And I consider this another point of empathy. So this really has tones of like this sort of Native America versus colonial Europe type of setup, like the very low tech versus the very high tech. So we've seen this sort of themes done before, where we have maybe like in Return of the Jedi, where you have like Ewoks and spears versus AT-ATs and ATSTs and the technology of the Empire. Okay, so I want to take a moment here to really take a look at page 7, because we're about to enter the second act, and these next few panels are a very important sequence in storytelling. So, page 7, we have this religious figure standing in front of the new American flag, finishing up his broadcast. Little Bird tosses the helmet. She's so enraged, she stabs the helmet with a knife. She has a moment where a tear wells up in her eye, and she says, "Mother." There's a silent panel where she sees the watch. And then the last panel on this page is "We had a plan," and she picks up the watch. I think this is a really important sequence, because not only does it detail like the stages of grief, but it also gives us a refusal of the call moment before she surges forward and continues her mission. I talk a little bit about the stages of grief in my video on the many deaths of Layla Starr. So let's take a little bit closer look at how Little Bird goes through hers. So back again on page 7, she experiences anger when she tosses the helmet and stabs it. There's a moment where she has sorrow and despair, thinking about her mother. Transitioning from anger to despair in the space of a gutter is a huge roller coaster change. And then for her to have a moment of silence is a really great opportunity to show that her emotions are settling, she's calming down, maybe even having doubts, because it's a silent panel, so you can feed whatever you want into that panel. And what's really great is I think this panel does double duty in that not only is she possibly having doubts, or maybe thinking this over, or reconsidering. She also has the watch in front of her, so it also kind of refocuses her. And we see in the next panel, she says, "We had a plan." So she's back on mission after 3 panels of extreme emotion. So I want to take another look at this page and do a little bit of an experiment. Let's remove the despair moment and the silent panel and just go from that anger moment to back on mission. Does that feel authentic to you as a viewer, as a reader? Personally, for me, I don't think that does feel authentic. I think this idea of being angry and like throwing the helmet down and stabbing it and then charging forward and saying, okay, now let's get back on mission. It just feels like it lacks a little bit of truth for some reason. And I think I've seen this a lot in other stories too, where that's just people just want to push forward onto the adventure. But I think it is so important just to have this moment of emotional change up, or even have this emotional moment of a contemplative refusal of the call before going on into the adventure. Now, I did talk a little bit about this refusal, how to skip a refusal of the call, in the video I did on Duke number 1, where it appears like if you're doing like a revenge story, then anger and that kind of extreme emotion will allow you to kind of surge forward past that refusal of the call, and just especially in terms of a revenge story, that allows them to charge forward and continue the story, because that story is based on emotion. Now, in this case, you might think that this is kind of a revenge story, because she stabs the helmet, and her mother, who said she would be back in a few days, come get her, but she's gone, and we can presume that she's dead at this point in the story. So you might think that this is a revenge story. So maybe the anger moment moving into the "we had a plan" moment works for you. But this is not a revenge story. This is definitely her being focused and following a plan. And there is not a lot of emotion driving that. It's not anger or passion that's driving that. It's just she's on mission at this point, okay? So here we are on page 8. We have Little Bird calling out to Oki, which ends up being her pet owl. And then we have something really interesting here. Remember when I said, how do we get Little Bird's world back into balance after that inciting incident? And I said, oh, well, she'll have to have a community. She'll have to have her mother back, among friends and family, all these things. Well, essentially, Little Bird gives us the bullet points of what she needs to resolve this story for her. She says, free the axe, save the people, free the North, save the world. That's it. If she can hit those bullet points, her mission will be complete and this story will end. So I kind of want to point out panel 3 here, which I think is really interesting. If you go back onto my video on Rook Exodus, where Geoff Johns essentially has a solo character in that book, and all his thoughts are essentially told to us through narration. Here we have a little bit of the suggestion that I made that might have improved Rook Exodus a little bit, is having Animal with the main character that they can talk to. And at the time in Rook Exodus, I said, hey, this might make the character look a little crazy. But here we can see that the Little Bird creative team is doing that. Little Bird is talking to her pet owl, and she seems completely sane. So I really stand by that. I think that's a great way. If you have a solo character, it's a great way to just kind of get their voice out there where they're not narrating to you all the time. Instead, they're having a conversation with an owl. And the owl kind of answers back as well. Unfortunately, in this dialogue exchange, we get a lot of redundancies. So essentially she says, they've done it, they've killed everyone, and I can't find Mother. It'll be okay, Oki. We'll stick to the plan. We'll be okay. So that's kind of just the information that we already knew. This is the only little bit of new information. The axe can fix this. He can do anything. And even that, it's sort of like a vague generalization. I don't even know if this dialogue was even necessary, to be honest. But especially in such a deftly edited story so far, this feels like a little bit of fat that you probably could have removed and it would have been completely fine. All right, here we go. Scene 3 is 3 pages long. So this is page 9. We get the title New Vatican, the United Nations of America. We get a full introduction to our antagonist, and he is vain, which is a great character trait for a villain. He talks with another character named Reverend Mother, and we find out that Little Bird's mother, Tantu, is still alive and being held prisoner. They talk about someone named Gabriel, who we haven't met yet, and something called the resurrection gene. So on pages 10 and 11, they continue talking, and we essentially find out that this religion is the ruling class that has displaced politics, Wall Street, and science. It is now the dominant force ruling the country. It's really interesting to see the villain as sort of this religious zealot who is going to such extremes in the name of his own, religious beliefs. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of colonialism and versus Native American life. So I feel like this is kind of following a certain theme that is repeated throughout history. All right, we're going into scene 4, which is 10 pages long. It's kind of a long scene, but it is a collection of smaller moments, but I'm going to combine them so it is one long scene, which I'll call the prison break scene. So we're looking at pages 12 through 14. We get the title Rocky Mountains, 22,000 feet. We get 3 pages where Little Bird narrates a dream about a woman becoming a wolf, but visually, we see something very different. Little Bird climbs through the mountains and is tracked by a wolf until the wolf attacks, but we don't see the action. Again, only the aftermath, which is a pile of blood and intestines in the foreground, and a dome prison in the background. It's a little confusing, but I think it's meant to be confusing because it will be cleared up on the next page. Then we get a new title, which says Northern Guard Penitentiary for Genetically Modified Beings. So now on page 15, we cut to one of the workers at the prison named 75. He uses a robotic arm to open doors, and we find out that this is his last shift on his last day of work. You know what that means. He notices something on camera, and the computer tells him that it appears to be a wolf walking through the snow in poor condition. But then 75 asks, how did it get my arm? And we get a close-up of the wolf, and we see that this bleeding out wolf is essentially holding his robotic arm while it's crawling through the snow. So here we have another bit of storytelling jump that doesn't appear on the page. Little Bird has killed and disemboweled a wolf and is using the fur to disguise herself. She also somehow managed to steal 75's arm in the few panels from when he put it down to now. This is sort of a fun shortcut. It's kind of impossible that she could have stolen his arm, and I feel like there's a longer story there that was cut for time. But at the same time, I like it because we didn't really need that. Again, there's some really deft editing going on. It's just like, this is just like cutting to the bare essentials of storytelling. They give you the most minimum amount of information and they leave you to connect the dots yourself, which I absolutely love. It's almost like a little bit of a puzzle as you're reading, which is really fun for me personally. I like this technique, but I'm not sure I've ever seen it before. There's no visual clues that I can see where she stole the arm, and even though it's implausible, I'm totally going with it. I love it. So now we're on page 16. Little Bird sneaks through the prison and uses the arm to open the door and reveals an axe. Now, on my very first reading, I thought she was actually searching for an axe. And it was a nice surprise in the next few panels and next few pages where she discovers a person named the axe. But upon my second reading, I saw that actually it is mentioned that the axe is a person on 2 different occasions. So that was just my misreading. But I really like that idea, kind of like a sleight of hand where you're searching for the axe. She finds an axe, and then a few pages later, she finds the actual axe, which is a person. I kind of wish they had gone in that direction. That would have been fun, but hey. We also see that 75 is hunting down Little Bird because he needs his arm back. The computer tells him and us that the army of 12 is scheduled to arrive very soon and everyone is supposed to leave the prison. Page 17, Little Bird drags the axe through the facility undetected, and we get a few glimpses of the residents in the prison. 75 tracks Little Bird to a high security section, and we see some more prisoners, including some nice little Easter eggs of other pop culture characters, like maybe Superman or maybe Yoda. So on page 18, 75 can't find Little Bird, but he does find the axe. He tells Little Bird that an army of soldiers are coming to kill everyone. He doesn't want to be here when they get here, but he does want his arm back. 75 searches everywhere, and we get a first glimpse of Axe, the prisoner, but still can't find Little Bird until she surprises him and drops down on him. Now, page 19, Little Bird has a knife to 75's throat and has the upper hand. She wants him to free the axe, but with a quick move, 75 gets the upper hand, slams her against Axe's cell. This is also sort of our first little bit of action in the story that we're actually seeing on the page. All the action up until this point has been off panel. So page 20, we get to see 75. He is very aggressive and abusive towards this little child warrior. It is so abusive and aggressive that it enrages the axe in his prison cell. And he ends up breaking out of his glass prison door with a few punches and says, "Let her go." Really interesting character design on the axe. Look at all the scars on his skin. It's almost just like just old battle damage, old cuts. Pretty gruesome. So on page 21, the scene ends with this intercut of action, which I didn't really pick up at first. Axe corners 75 as he tries to run away, and we intercut with the army of 12 descending upon the prison. The scene ends with the shadow of Axe's hand descending over 75's face, and it's left to our imagination of what exactly that the axe does to him for now. So scene 5 is 4 pages long, and we're on page 22. Now, I don't actually think we get the name of the antagonist in the story, but he does call himself the Vicar of Christ, so I'm just going to call him Vic for the purposes of this analysis, just so we have a shorthand. Page 22, we're back at New Vatican at a different prison. Vic walks through his surreal empire, and we hear that Gabriel's body has rejected Tantu. Again, still don't know who Gabriel is. We don't exactly know what rejected Tantu, what that exactly means yet. Page 23, Vic enters the cell, and we get this great shot of Tantu as a prisoner. Blood everywhere, and such a great joke where she says, "I didn't know you were coming by. I would have cleaned up the place." I got to admit, I wish I had written that joke. That's a really good one. Vic says he's been worried about Tantu like a parent, but she's not buying it. Page 24, Tantu manages to grapple Vic's head with her legs and attempts to choke the life out of him and says, "You think of nobody but yourself, and you are a father to no one." Vic's guards fly to the rescue. Page 25, we get a little bit of action. Again, we don't get to see the action. It's sort of happening in this sort of cloud of dust. But his childlike bodyguards are coming in to save Vic. And Vic reveals that the axe is Tantu's father to us, the readers. And that he's going to destroy the prison where the axe is held. There's a look of shock on Tantu's face as she says "Little Bird," because she knows that her daughter is at the prison right now trying to rescue the axe. And in this last panel, we get this view of these childlike guards and see that they are way more than they appear. Under their robes, they have this sort of weird, twisted, organic matter mixed with some kind of mechanical sword and metal and thorns. Really love that sort of concept and that idea. It's sort of like this weird cloaked ugliness underneath these robes, which could be a sort of thematically a part of the type of world that the writer is trying to create for the antagonist. Okay, now we're into scene 6, which is 4 pages long. All right, page 26, we cut back to the Axe and Little Bird as they introduce themselves to each other and ride up the elevator. When the doors open, they meet the Army of 12, which is a half-page splash. So I want to point out how great these characters are. If you notice on their design, they have blood all over them already, so they've already killed a lot of people. But I really particularly love how the faces are drawn. And these are not masks that are covering a face. Essentially, they are glass masks holding back whatever organic matter is just flowing behind them. As you can see, eyeballs kind of jiggling around, and it's so fun. It's such a great idea. I really like that. So pages 27 to 29 in this scene are action pages. So I'm going to highlight those in orange. We have Little Bird making a little snarky comment at the beginning, and she's ready to go. She's ready to fight. They engage with the Army of 12, and the Axe goes in swinging, literally, and pretty much cuts one of the Army of 12 in half. Now, there's something really great happening here. And again, it's visual storytelling. It's not any type of dialogue or narration that's telling us this. But look at this sort of one panel where you see the Axe, a younger version of himself, swinging this axe behind the current version of himself, which is this old, beaten, battered, and scarred man. And just in this sort of visual juxtaposition, the way I read it is that he's sort of living his youth again. He's been in prison this whole time, or for a long time, and now he's out there fighting again, and he's feeling young again. Really love this visual juxtaposition. It tells us so much without literally telling us through narration or dialogue. And I think maybe on the first read I missed this. So this is really subtle, and I just love the storytelling. It's such a great technique, and I'm definitely going to steal this for my own storytelling. Sorry. This action scene that happens between 27 and 29 is brutal. It is so violent and so bloody that the blood spills off the panel and goes into the gutter. That's how bloody this fight is. And you get to see the back and forth between the 12 and Little Bird and the Axe. And the Axe gets stabbed at some point. The battle finally ends with the Axe standing amidst all this blood and matter. But there are these sort of beeps coming from the corpses of the 12. And the Axe knows that something's up, and he tells Little Bird to run. So now we're into scene 7 pages. This is the direct moment after they've attacked the 12. And you might mistakenly put this scene with the previous scene, but I'm going to break this out on its own because the previous scene was sort of this extra-personal outer conflict between our main characters and the antagonists. But now we're going to get into a scene where we're going to have some argument and some back and forth between the Axe and Little Bird, which is more of a personal conflict. So I'm going to break this scene out because I think it's dealing with a little bit of a different issue. So page 30, Axe and Little Bird run from the prison. The outer conflict action is over, and now we're going to get into some personal conflict. Little Bird says that the Axe can go back and save the people in the prison. She thinks he's invincible. She says he could have busted out anytime he wanted. But the Axe says it ain't like that, kid, and says that you're too young, you wouldn't understand. Whoever you're looking for ain't me. So we're kind of getting this character, this old character who has, kind of gotten on in his days, and he's not really that young fighter that we saw a brief glimpse of previously, but he's an old man. He wants to rest, essentially. And he's having doubts. He's having sort of his own refusal of the call, really. It would be strange if he just kind of jumped up and said, "Yeah, let's go fight." Right? No, it's. I think it adds more character, more depth to him if he says, "I don't really want to fight anymore." And this isn't. I don't have that sort of youthful energy that you do. It's a really nice sort of contrast and a great sort of personal conflict between the two characters. So the prison blows up in the middle of their conversation, and they finally get a chance to sit down and rest. So, page 31, Little Bird says that everyone she knows is dead and that they've taken her mother. Now, there is something I'm not really clear on, which is how Little Bird knows that her mother has been taken and not killed. As a reader, at this point in the story, I assumed she was dead. And the interesting thing is that in the world of the story, there is a reason why she doesn't think her mother is dead. But it hasn't really been told to her, and she hasn't discovered that information yet. Little Bird hasn't discovered that information yet. So it can kind of feel like a little bit of a plot hole. I'm not sure how to reconcile that. Do you kind of appeal to the reader, or do you kind of stick to that world, or was there a better way to reveal this information, or maybe have her discover this information a little bit earlier, maybe through that helmet? I'm not sure, but some things, don't feel like they match up right now, but they will eventually in future issues. But it's really interesting to add that if she thinks her mother is still alive, or if she knows her mother is still alive, this is definitely not a revenge story. So that inciting incident, the moment after that refusal of the call, she's not having a moment of anger as she moves forward with the plan. She's just almost mechanically, loyally sticking with the plan. It doesn't happen out of rage or anger. So it turns out that Axe refuses to help her save the world, which is great. It would be really bad if he was completely on board. But the fact that he's giving a little bit of a pushback to her plans gives us a little bit of conflict and interest. So Little Bird gets upset and tosses him the watch. So on page 32, Little Bird is shot through the neck before the watch even hits the snow. So this was a really nice, shocking surprise for me, and I bet for a bunch of readers, because we have had. The story has been set up where Little Bird is going to be on this mission, and we were going to follow her all the way through it. And the fact that she is shot through the neck and essentially falls and dies is a complete turn of events. And I really love the kind of storytelling where you can take people's expectations. I almost feel like the best storytelling is where you take, you put the readers on a certain path and give them expectations, and then you can twist that. I think all the best writers do that. It's not as easy to do as it sounds. It's weird to kind of be able to set people up, make them believe things are going to happen, and then give that twist. I think it's an instinctual thing. I'm not sure if you can really learn that, because I'm always trying to do that, but I almost feel like people who read my work they have those expectations. They know. I think what it is that I think it's going to be a nice twist, but people see it coming a mile away, and I definitely need to get better at that. But so here we go. This is a nice shock for me, a really nice surprise. But I will also say that I was a little confused in this panel, because we have this bullet sound effect, which is a bang, and then we have this sort of line going through, which I almost interpreted as the path or the trajectory of the bullet going behind Little Bird. But then there's also like a very small amount of blood on her neck. And I'll tell you, I did not see the blood at first. And then as I went down the page and saw her eventually on the ground, and you see her bleeding out from the neck, I went back up to the first panel and said, oh, wow, she did get shot through the neck. But if you notice, as I mentioned earlier in the story, this artist does not draw speed lines. In fact, it's more of like reactionary lines. So I'm wondering if this is like a little bit of a drawback for that artistic choice, is that you don't really have the path of a bullet being illustrated. Instead, you have the reaction of the bullet being drawn. But it did confuse me originally when I did the first read. I had to go back and forth up and down the page to kind of make it make sense. Was that intentional? Was that not intentional? I don't know. But I think anything that kind of hangs up the reader a little bit, makes them double take or makes them have to figure out what is going on, I think that's always a bad thing. And I think maybe sort of the stylistic choice with action might have been a little bit of a detriment in just this one panel. Everything else has been working really well. So when you see Little Bird, your main character, your title character, die, your first thought is, well, I'll say my first thought is, there's no way she's dead. But as you see at the end of the page, she's grasping the map, and her last words are mother. So moving to page 33, and we see that 75 is back. He's the one who shot Little Bird. He has this great line, which says, "It was my last frickin' day," which is hilarious. And now it definitely is his last day because the axe, out of anger, cuts 75 right down the middle. There is a little bit of confusion I have in this sort of 3/4 splash, though. And if anybody out there is watching and you know what this is, please help me out, because we have this caption box in the upper left. It says "Don't go." And at first I thought, oh, this is Little Bird's continuation from the previous page where she says mother, and then 3 panels later she says "Don't go." But throughout the story, Little Bird has had a very specific type of caption box, and it is not this caption box. So I'm not exactly sure who is saying "Don't go." If you know, please fill me in. It kind of feels like it just doesn't fit in this scene at all, and I'm not sure who's saying it. We're now at page 34, and I'm thinking, there's no way Little Bird can be dead. Again, title character of this book, but then again, there was a moment at the beginning of the book where she says, "This is the story of my life and my death," and I thought, wow, maybe this actually is her death. Maybe this is the end of her story, which it would be really interesting. So, page 34, Axe picks up and straps on this watch that was tossed to him and wonders where Little Bird came from. He pulls the map from her hand and reads it, saying off panel, no, not this. I can't go back. By the looks of it, Little Bird is definitely dead, which is still pretty shocking to me anyways. Page 35, the Axe's words, "I can't go back," sends us into a flashback, which I think is really, really well done. We get to see a younger version of Axe begging Vic, who is also younger, and he says, "I'm begging you, Bishop." And then Vic says, "Your wife begged us as well, Axe," and that didn't get her very far. And you can see this panel where Axe is on his knees, he's being chained, he's being surrounded by these soldiers, and there is sort of rubble behind the bishop and a skeleton. The final panel on this page has Vic holding a baby, and we hear him say, "But this child, this dear sweet child, one must wonder what kind of world we are living in when a baby is so easily abandoned." Okay, so I'm not sure how clear it is, but essentially Vic has taken this child from Axe. So this is Tantu as a baby. So essentially Little Bird is the granddaughter of the Axe. But they don't seem to know that they're related up until this point of the story. So now we're on to the final page of issue 1, which is page 36. And we're back in present day. We get to see Oki, and we're back into hearing Little Bird's narration again, which is, "We had a plan, free the Axe, save the people, free the North, save the world." Again, reaffirming the objective for Little Bird. Now, that's the end of issue 1. Before we take our 10,000-foot view of the story, I kind of want to take a look at this ending, which is really intriguing to me. Definitely worth checking out. Now, in the world of comics, you typically have cliffhanger endings, right? Where Spider-Man or Mary Jane is maybe kidnapped, and the big question is, will Spider-Man be able to save Mary Jane, or will Batman die in the next issue? And it's designed to bring the reader back through a bit of suspense. Now they also do this in binge-worthy shows like on Netflix or any kind of subscription television, where you can binge watch them all together, and each episode ends with sort of this cliffhanger ending that makes you click into the next episode. It's sort of a tried and true technique, but notice that they're doing something different here, which is not will Little Bird survive. Tune in next issue and find out Little Bird is already dead. She's gone. They're actually doing something which I think is really interesting, which is they're almost structurally, thematically, functionally, I'm not sure how to articulate that, but it's almost story structure oriented, where you as the reader, or I'll say I as the reader, wonder what's going to happen next now that Little Bird is dead. We see this caption of, we had a plan, free the Axe, save the people, and we see this image of the Axe looking at this map in front of a campfire. And my next thought is the Axe going to take up the reins of Little Bird, and now we're going to follow him on this journey? So essentially, instead of creating a suspense moment of will this person die, the creative team has created a suspense moment in how is this story going to continue, and that is the intriguing part. And I think that is really exciting. That's a lot of fun. That's something I would love to try someday, but I don't think I've ever seen this done before. And I think if you do this in your own storytelling, it's just going to feel like a copy, because this is so unique. But just sort of a really brilliant way to keep people engaged and move forward into the next issue. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I think it's a really well-crafted suspense ending without the typical tropes of most comic book suspense endings. So let's take a look at the 10,000 foot view of this story. We have a total of 7 scenes in the first issue, 36 pages long. We have not one, not two, but 3 points of empathy in the first 2 scenes. We also have an inciting incident within the second scene, which is really nice. Even though it's a 36-page comic, they're wasting no time in getting you into this story. So the second act begins on page 7 when Little Bird rediscovers that watch and bullet points the plan for us. And that is in scene 3. That is in scene 2, actually. Again, happening incredibly fast for a 36-page comic. Notice how the action doesn't really happen until scene 4 and scene 6. Scene 4 is when she's in the prison and she's fighting with 75. Just 2 pages of action. But up until then, all the action is really happening off panel, which is a really interesting choice. Again, bringing you into the story right away, second scene, and making sure you're hooked and continuing to read. And again, ending with a really great sort of unique cliffhanger ending, which is more storytelling structure oriented than character jeopardy oriented. Now let's think about this. What do we know about Little Bird at the beginning of this story, right? We've never seen her play with friends. We never saw her talk to her mother. We never saw her have joy, playing with her pets. There was really no life. And I think what happens is you can bring a reader into a story very quickly like this, but at the same time, you are leaving off like an internal character arc in that ordinary world that she's a part of. At this point, you just kind of assume her ordinary world is just fighting. She's a warrior child. She's very skilled. You don't imagine her in school, right? Or playing with her friends. The thing is, without that sort of ordinary world established of seeing that previous life she had before the inciting incident, she can feel a little bit like a two-dimensional character, right? All we know is she's like she's on the warpath, essentially. She is out to not get revenge, but to execute a plan. She's very skilled. She's very, very driven as well. But at the same time, with a flat character arc, the character like Batman or James Bond, the character is the same at the beginning of the story as they are at the end of the story. And I kind of think, will Little Bird be different at the end of the story than she is at the beginning of the story? So essentially, Little Bird doesn't change emotionally through the story. She doesn't have that sort of cathartic moment. At the end of the story, she's essentially a warrior, still a warrior. That hasn't changed much internally, but a lot of her conflict has been through personal conflict and definitely through extrapersonal conflict. There is a worry, so there's the trade-off where you might not get the kind of depth of emotional character change that you normally would, because you're not really getting much insight into the inner world of this character. I actually think Tantu is a more fleshed out character. As you continue to read the story, you see some of the drama that has gone on in her life, what she has become as a baby. She's taken by Vic, and sort of the life she had to live, and then sort of the realizations she's had. That to me is a much more three-dimensional character, whereas right now Little Bird just feels like a 2D character, but that's okay because she's in a way this vehicle that sort of gets us through this mission. I think it works because the mission is so clear. There are 3 points of empathy for these characters, as well as I think she is designed with a flat character arc, meaning much like a detective, the main character doesn't change throughout the story. But also this kind of leads to, like I said, with Something is Killing the Children, when you have a flat character arc, it tends to spawn more stories that can be told by through this character. Again, like Batman has how many stories out there? He's never changed. He will always be Batman at the end of the day. He'll always be the grumpy old man with a heart of gold. Same thing with James Bond or Jack Reacher. These are all characters that don't really change necessarily. I also want to talk a little bit about the art. We did mention like the way Ian Bertram does movement, which is really interesting. I think if you really like Ian Bertram's art, you should definitely check out Frank Quitely, who has sort of a very similar style and is also an incredible artist who puts a lot of thought into their art. And I think both of these artists are influenced by Moebius. So if you like this drawing style, definitely check out Frank Quitely, and definitely check out sort of the grandfather of this style, which is Moebius, who's also doing sort of these surreal pastel type colored environments. So overall, the first issue of Little Bird is a really great read. Some great hooks, great suspense moments, some really nice surprises. Definitely worth checking out. And I think it goes without saying, the amount of reduction that is happening in this story, where it's giving you the absolute least amount of information possible, and but it's still there. It's still on the page. The artist is putting it in the background, and the writer is making sure you're getting the words that you need to make sense of it all. Such an incredible amount of editing in this story. It's definitely worth a read, and I highly recommend checking out Little Bird issue 1. If you like this analysis and you like the review, please like, subscribe, and follow. Share this with your friends who are also into storytelling, and let's build a community together. My name is Dan Finley. This was The Story Grind. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.